Hello and welcome to the Discover Dayton podcast, the show that's all about the Gem City's past, present, and future. My name is Arch Grieve, and I'm your host, and today I get to talk to Kathryn Poe, a policy expert at Equality Ohio and the face of their TikTok account. Equality Ohio's mission is to identify and transform systems and institutions so that LGBTQ plus Ohioans can fully access legal and lived equality. So I'm excited to talk to her about the work they're doing and what's happening at the state level in particular. So stay tuned. Well, hello and welcome to the show, and thanks so much for coming on to talk with me today.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. Super excited to be here.
Absolutely. I'm glad you're here too. Well, so for starters, some may recognize your voice as the person who does Equality Ohio's TikTok account. But for those who aren't on TikTok or maybe don't know what Equality Ohio does, can you talk about the organization a bit and your role there?
Yeah, so Equality Ohio is our statewide legislative and legal nonprofit organization that is dedicated to LGBTQ people and equality. I am our public policy and communications organizer. And so most of what I do is within our policy department, kind of working at the state, federal, and local level. But I also do stuff in communications, and that does include our TikTok account, which is just a really cool kind of public information account that we started, I believe, 6 months ago now. So it's been pretty cool.
You've done a great job with it, and I love following you guys. So, well, moving on though to kind of why I asked you on the show is, right now, unfortunately, there seems to be a wave of attacks against the LGBTQ plus community across the country, and we're not exempt from that here in Ohio either. Are there any similar themes that you're seeing spanning across all these different states?
Yeah, I think the thing to keep in mind with a lot of these bills is that they're exceptionally cruel. They largely target youth and young adults, and they have a lot to do with attacks on bodily autonomy and, government intrusion into healthcare and schools, and basically just policing of our young people. Ohio has, I believe, 4 or 5 anti-trans bills moving through the legislature right now. All of them, to my knowledge, are targeted at young people and students. And it's really this attempt to get into youth's lives in this really dangerous way, and just kind of create this invisibility cloak over LGBTQ youth in our state. They are trying to basically just erase these kids from the face of the planet, because and it's really just part of this national coordinated campaign. And it's really terrible to watch, but it is also here in Ohio. You see a lot of headlines about Texas and Florida, but we have those bills in Ohio too.
Well, so let's talk about some of that specific legislation that Ohio is considering at the moment and what it will mean for people if it passes. And I'd like to start with House Bill 454, which seeks to end gender-affirming care, along with a lot of other things. Could you start by explaining what gender-affirming care is, and then talk about what this bill will do and the impact it will have not only on LGBTQ plus youth, but also their families, teachers, physicians?
Yeah, so there is I think, misconception about gender-affirming healthcare. And that misconception is that gender-affirming healthcare is always medical, right? And I think that's really the picture that politicians want to paint, is that, you have a person that is a young person just discovering their gender identity, and they immediately go into the doctor's office and they immediately prescribe them hormones. And that is just so silly and not at all the reality of the situation. Gender affirming care is all aspects of affirming someone's identity. So, and it usually starts out with mental health care and what we call social transition. So social transition is when someone begins to come out publicly as someone that is either non-binary, which is not male or female, but somewhere in between, or just, trans masc, trans femme, and they start to kind of take on some of those social traits. So they might change their name, they might change their pronouns. And it's kind of a process of like becoming yourself within your family structure and your community. And that usually takes a while. And that's where most youth start. They start by changing their pronouns and gender identity in school, and home, and, getting settled with that, and then further deciding that they want to pursue medical transition. And usually this is because of extreme discomfort and body dysmorphia, and it's always guided by doctors and their family members. And it really is just like this whole process, just like anyone else who goes through a medical system knows. Anything to do with medicine and medical transition is a team, it's interdisciplinary, and it involves a lot of different kinds of things over the course of a period of years. And so gender affirming care is actually, it's a term that encompasses a lot of different parts and pieces. And it's absolutely not just like going in and getting hormones, which is why I think this bill is so reductive, because it really does just make the process seem like healthcare. And that's usually the last thing that a lot of transgender people, especially youth, get to pursue. As for what the bill is, so the bill is a ban on gender affirming healthcare for minors. And this bill does this by banning insurance companies from covering it. It revokes hospital funding from hospitals that may provide it, and threatens to remove the licensure of doctors that could provide it. It is not criminalizing, so it's not criminalizing of the doctors that perform it, but it does everything else, right? And there are certain parts of the bill that ban very specific procedures that someone might pursue as a part of gender affirming care. Many of them are not commonly pursued, but it does ban specific procedures. And it also has a specific section in the bill that is specific to schools. So this one section says that students that may either explicitly state or show a behavior that doesn't align with their gender identity, and a teacher, a guidance counselor, someone observes this behavior, that they then have to report to the child's parents that they may or may not be transgender. And this provision is really, honestly, just very silly because it's super broad, right? It's already like a confidentiality nightmare because it goes against ethics standards, but also there's no way for this to be equally applied across school districts. And it's not specific about what that means. So this could be a boy wearing a dress to school because he thought it was funny, as elementary schoolers sometimes do. And I could get him reported to his parents, which just creates this like feeling of fear around transgender people and conforming to your gender identity. And it's just this really intrusive bill into every aspect of a young person's life.
Yeah, it just really, it seems so subjective and absurd. So
yeah.
Well, that's a great explanation. Thank you. And another bill that's targeting transgender youth in particular seems to be HB 61, which proponents call the Save Women's Sports Act. Can you explain what that would do and why Equality Ohio is pushing back so strongly against it?
Yeah, so the Save Women's Sports Act it does not save any women at all.
It's very Orwellian.
Yeah, like this bill is a part of the attacks again on trans youth all around the country. And it's passed in, I believe, 11 states now. But basically what this bill does is it bans students, anyone of both genders, so male and female, of playing on the team in sports that aligns with their gender identity all the way up through the college level. And so this is effectively a ban on transgender athletes playing in sports, because I don't think a lot of people realize that most of the time these kids, by the time that they're playing on their high school sports team, are already like a year or 2 or 3 into transitioning. All of their peers view them as their gender identity. They use the right pronouns. They know that this is their friend and peer on their team. And then if this bill were to pass, it would effectively cut that off like immediately, because they're not going to transition back, right, just to play on a sports team. And so it does effectively ban them from sports. And this bill is another instance of government intrusion. This one is honestly, like, I think that if you're going to make a conservative argument about these bills, this bill is one of the easier ones to do it for, especially because, like, so the Ohio Athletic Association has had a policy about allowing transgender athletes to play since 2015. So this is an already established policy. It's worked. There's literally never been a complaint. In the entire state of Ohio, this would affect less than 5 kids. And so it's really already something that is not an issue here. Even at the collegiate level, it's not an issue. We've never had a problem. And so this bill is not only the government, moving into an area that they kind of just don't belong and is already regulated by an independent body, but it's just not a problem here. Like, we've never had this issue. This is an outside special interest group coming into Ohio and telling our lawmakers that this is an issue, but Ohioans know that this isn't a problem. And it's just very clear that this is someone coming in and trying to make it one.
Well, it's ironic too that the people pushing it are the small government people. It's just,
yeah.
But, obviously those are bills that you're all urging people to, push back against, but there's also laws that you're advocating for, and not just at the state level. Could you talk a little bit about the Federal Equality Act and what impact that would have on people, not just here in Dayton, Ohio, but across the country?
Yeah, so the Federal Equality Act is the non-discrimination law for the entire country that would protect LGBTQ people in housing, employment, credit, and it would really protect people in employment. I believe in employment, it protects people down to 15 employees. And this law would give LGBTQ people, quite simply, civil rights protections in the United States, which is something that we currently don't have. A lot of people think that we do have it because of marriage equality, but we actually don't. And it's supported by most of the public. It's a really popular thing. In Ohio, 74% of people believe in non-discrimination protections for LGBTQ people. Around the country, that number is higher. So this is a really popular bill. It has passed through the House, and it has not been brought for a vote in the Senate yet, but we're hoping that will happen sometime this year.
I hope so too. And I understand that there's also a similar Equality Act here in Ohio that's being sponsored by what looks to be a bipartisan coalition. So would that end up doing largely the same thing just for Ohioans?
It would, yeah. So the Ohio Fairness Act is the version of the law just for Ohio. There are some differences. So, for example, the Ohio Fairness Act maintains all current religious exemptions, which is one of the reasons why it's able to be bipartisan. It maintains religious exemptions. It covers employees for small businesses actually more than the Federal Equality Act does. I believe our bill covers down to small businesses with 5 employees. Oh, okay. And so there are those key differences that make it a little bit more bipartisan. But essentially, the Ohio Fairness Act does do the same thing. It protects people in employment, housing, credit, and public accommodation. Public accommodation is actually really the big one. That means that, if you go into any business in Ohio, they will serve you if you're an LGBTQ person. And so this bill, it would just change a lot of people's lives. And I think it would just change the overall vibe of the state and make LGBTQ people just feel more accepted here. Because I don't know, Ohio's great. I actually like living here. I'm 24 and I like living in Ohio, and people think that that's so silly. But I do. I really love it here and I want to stay. And the Ohio Fairness Act would make it a lot safer for me to stay.
Absolutely. And I mean, do we have any predictions on whether or not it's going to pass?
So we are hoping for hearings this upcoming spring and fall. We know that right now with redistricting, everything is really, really crazy, but we are definitely still hopeful. And we do think we will see some movement on the bill this year.
Okay, great. Well, so another piece of legislation you're supporting at the state level is actually two pieces of legislation at the moment, but both bills in the House and Senate are designed to protect LGBTQ plus youth from conversion therapy. First, I guess, in case anyone doesn't know, can you explain what conversion therapy is and why it's a practice that needs to be ended?
Yeah, so conversion therapy is the practice of trying to change someone's either gender identity or sexual orientation through therapy, often through Christian therapists or some sort of religious intervention. But also there are licensed counselors that do this practice, and you're either usually Christian counselors and licensed practice that do it under both. And what this does is it's very specific to banning the practice within licensed professional counselors. Obviously, because of religious freedom, there is a very notable difference in between something that is Christian counseling that is within someone's religion and something that is like a licensed practice. And so this bill bans the use of conversion therapy for licensed counselors. And I always like to make that difference because it is important to make sure that people know that this is, debunked, but especially within someone that has their licensure and is operating as a professional counselor. And also, this is a conversion therapy ban for minors only. If you are an adult, obviously, if you want to receive these services, we shouldn't be able to stop you from doing that as an adult. But for minors, this is particularly harmful. It's also often like coercion of minors who don't want this and are being put in this situation by adults in their life. And so it becomes particularly abusive. And so these bills would ban those practices in the state of Ohio.
Okay, great. Well, so getting a little bit closer to home, because this podcast is really focused on Dayton. Most people in Dayton are going to be represented by Willis Blackshear Jr. in the House and Stephen Huffman in the Ohio Senate. So can you talk about those two a bit in relation to what their stances are on issues that Equality Ohio is advocating for?
Yeah, so Representative Blackshear is a supporter. We know that we've got his vote on the Ohio Fairness Act and very likely in opposition to the anti-trans bills. And so while we don't work with the representative a ton as of right now, we do know that he's a supporter of ours, and we're expecting his vote. As for Senator Huffman, Stephen Huffman, so I'm sure that you know this, but Steve and Matt Huffman are cousins. Matt is the president of the Senate. Stephen is a senator in the Ohio Senate, but he's on Health Committee, which is where people predominantly think about him. And I know that Senator Huffman, has not historically been someone that is supportive of our issues in the past, but occasionally we find some odd bedfellows, especially because of these issues of government intrusion. And Equality Ohio is always open to working with everyone. So we definitely encourage people to reach out to him, especially on senators and representatives that are more conservative. There's this common argument that LGBTQ people just don't exist in their district, that discrimination doesn't happen here, that it's not something that's important to their constituents. And so reaching out to someone like Senator Huffman would be really, really helpful, because it helps show that, no, this is something that is important to us. We care about this. We exist here. We're in your district. And so it's always good to get those phone calls in.
Gotcha. So it sounds like people listening have some homework to do. Thank you. Well, so obviously I mentioned I found you all on TikTok, and I love your videos on there. They're absolutely. They're super informative, entertaining. But aside from that, if people want to learn more about some of these issues, where all can they go? And obviously, what is it just at Equality Ohio on TikTok?
Yeah, so on TikTok, we are at Equality Ohio. I post there quite frequently, but other staff members post there as well. And we like to focus on, the account is mostly LGBTQ stuff, but we also try to give the whole picture of Ohio politics. It's really important to me to do that, like general education about the process, because most people don't engage with state government a ton. And so my goal with the account is really to talk about state government as a whole too. And so we do updates on redistricting and all that stuff on that account. And then as for the rest of the organization, I usually suggest people check out our Facebook page or Twitter. We're pretty active on there. We're also pretty active on Instagram. Our website is also just a really good resource. If you're looking to see if your locality is protected through an ordinance, or connect with us for volunteer nights, which is something that we do once a month, I believe on Thursdays. You can connect with us there and get signed up and get more involved with our work.
Yeah, and it is a super, I love the map that's on there that you were talking about, of all the cities that have passed inclusive legislation at the local level. And I was glad to see, because I wasn't sure, because I moved to Dayton, 6 or 7 years ago. And so I was glad to see Dayton was on that list, but there are too many Ohio cities that aren't. So
yeah, there's 35, I believe, and we're passing new ordinances all the time. So if you're a listener and you're interested in passing an ordinance in your locality, you can also reach out to us. That is something that we are very involved in doing, and we'd be happy to talk to you about it.
Awesome. Well, so, along those lines, some people listening may want to support the work you're doing in that way, or others. What's the best way for them to go about doing that?
So you can reach out to me personally at Kathryn, Kathryn, at equalityohio.org. If you're interested in submitting testimony on any of these bills, a really big part of my job is sitting down with people and learning their stories and helping them to write testimony or opinion articles. And kind of just like get their voices out there. We can also help you meet with lawmakers. So if you're interested in meeting with your lawmaker, we can work with you to set up a time, even on like various bills. And we're always really interested in hearing from community members. So if there's a particular issue that you're passionate about that I didn't talk about today, you can also reach out to us, and we would just love to talk to you about your experience in the community. We're very, very active in local stuff. And so, if there is an NDO in your area, we always recommend coming out to support that. And then Pride is a common, if you see us at your local Pride, please come say hello. We're always so excited to see people, but I believe this year we're doing upwards of 65 Prides all over the state.
Wow.
So we will probably be at your Pride.
Awesome. I'm really impressed. I didn't hear you even say donations, but you guys take those, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh my God, my development director is kicking me right now. And then you can always donate to Equality Ohio.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today. I really appreciate it. And thank you for the work that you and Equality Ohio are doing as well. It's super important, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely. All right. Well, that was my interview with Kathryn Poe of Equality Ohio, and I can't say enough about the important work they're doing at all levels of government, really. So be sure to find them on social media and find out how you can help support equality here in Dayton, Ohio, and beyond. That's it for this episode. So if you enjoyed it, please be sure to subscribe, write a review, and share it with a friend. Thanks for listening, everyone, and stay funky, Dayton.